Hello, friends. Welcome to the Nexus Podcast. I'm your host, James Dice. Each week, I fire questions at the leaders of the smart buildings industry to try to figure out where we're headed and how we can get there faster without all the marketing fluff. I'm pushing my learning to the limit, and I'm so glad to have you here following along. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Nexus Pro. Nexus Pro is an annual or monthly subscription where members get exclusive writing, podcasts, and invites to members-only Zoom gatherings. You can find info on how to join and support the podcast at nexuslabs.online. Without further ado, please enjoy this episode of the Nexus Podcast. Episode 44 is a conversation with John Petze, partner and founder of Foundry and executive director of Project Haystack. We talked about John's illustrious career in smart buildings, which started long before that term was even coined. This is a fascinating history for those of you that weren't around back then. And then we narrowed in on Tridium, Foundry, and Project Haystack. Without further ado, please enjoy Nexus Podcast episode 44. All right, John, welcome to the show. Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, John Petze, known as co-founder and partner of Foundry, the makers of SkySpark, but have had numerous positions over the years in the building automation industry. So happy to be with you. And I do want to open with a comment that what you're doing is really valuable for the industry and for bringing new people in. So I really applaud you for what you're doing with Nexus Labs.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you for being one of the earliest members of the community. Appreciate that. So speaking of being early to the community, I want to talk about your career history. So a lot of this I didn't realize until you and I were emailing back and forth. So let's jump through it. So obviously we're going to get to SkySpark, where you started, but take us back to the beginning, if you would.
Yeah. Okay. So, I'm an engineering school graduate. I'm an industrial engineer from WPI. And, I was to make things, right? Plant, equipment, metal, fabrication, welding, make products, get them in boxes, get them out the door. I mean, that was my training and education. And I ended up in the HVAC industry from one of my early jobs with a company who made HVAC equipment. The company's called Mitco. And what's important about Mitco is this was the original inventor of variable air volume technology, held the original patent issued in 1962 or 1963. He was an immigrant who, I believe Hungary, if I remember, and got across the Iron Curtain when he was 14 years old and came to the US.
Wow.
He was quite a guy, a brilliant guy. Also, his name was Dmitry Gorchev. He was also a unique person, let's put it that way.
Okay.
But, so I'm in there and, running manufacturing engineering, operations manager, and, how do you build VAV boxes, improve production, improve reliability. And then we get into VAV air handlers and zero leakage dampers. He had a very famous ad where he was floating in his damper on a lake. And the ad was, let's see the CEO of Honeywell do this with his dampers. So you're but this is interesting, super focused on energy efficiency. Behind the Iron Curtain, energy mattered. It was a diehard theme of energy efficiency. That's why he invented VAV and zero leakage dampers and these air handlers, pioneered a whole new type of VAV air handler that was more efficient than any other one. So I'm operations manager running the production facility where we have, union employees and we're making stuff with metal.
Wow.
Okay. So that's where I get started.
Okay.
And we won't go into all the details, but that,
that's fascinating.
Things transition there. And I ended up taking an interview at Andover Controls, right? Through Headhunter, went up there and I had an interview and, I didn't really know what they did. The only exposure I had to controls at Mitco was mounting Robert Shaw pneumatic actuators on the VAV boxes. And then one day, these really weird linear screw actuators showed up from Stafa, and we didn't have any power supplies to hook these things up on the production line. Right? And the point of this is, I've had kind of a unique opportunity in my career to be involved in the earliest days of applying digital technology to HVAC systems. Not because I planned it, it happened, right? Yeah. So I go to Andover and long story short, I got hired as the very first application engineer they had. So when I got there, the engineers were still answering the phone from customers.
Okay.
And they gave me the job, and they gave me a desk, and they gave me a yellow pad of paper and a pencil and a brown phone. And they said, now you answer the phone from customers. Okay. And then they said, and we know you don't know anything, kid. No problem. You write it down, you come to us, and we'll tell you the answer, right?
Okay.
And then the guy, the VP, looked at me, and it was semi a smile, maybe partly a sneer, and he said, one time, John, meaning we're giving you the answer one time.
You don't get to come back again.
You don't get to come
questions.
back.
Okay.
But that was the exposure, right? And it was originally the Sunkeeper. I was programming Sunkeepers and supporting them, but then it was the AC-256, which really put Andover on the map. Anyways, so now I'm doing controls with computers, right? And the only exposure I had to a computer in college was the mainframe in the basement of the library where you had to go with your Fortran punch cards.
Okay.
And I was convinced that if that's what it took to program computers, they would never be used.
It's never going to work.
Because I couldn't type.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Okay.
I left Andover to go to their biggest dealer at the time on the West Coast called Conway Mechanical. And this is interesting. Now I went into the field and we did a really unique project. It was over 350 bank branches for Security Pacific Bank, no longer in existence, in California, with the small AC-8 and 300 baud modems and a TRS-80 to program 350, and you had manually type these things out, right? All over California and stuff. So, the type of thing of being in the basement of a building on a white bucket programming control systems. That happens. That's reality.
That's real. Okay.
Yeah.
And what year would this have been in? Just to
that was 84.
Okay.
Yeah, 84. Yeah.
So I was just wondering because we're still before I was born. We haven't got when I was born yet. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, the math will get tough here. But anyways, so that was a big Andover dealer. And I left there. I went back to Andover. So that's my second time back. And I ran what was now technical support and documentation and repair and all that type of stuff. And then I left there in 86 to join Teletrol. And joined Teletrol, noteworthy thing about Teletrol, that company was owned by Dean Kamen, the inventor of the Segway, the original inventor of automated infusion pumps for delivery of drugs, self-made millionaire, incredibly unique guy, one of the smartest people I ever encountered in my life, absolutely brilliant guy. But he had wandered into this building automation thing. Let's just say it wasn't his bailiwick. So he hired a team, small team.
Okay.
And I came up to run the company and we got some engineers and there was some already there and they were computer science guys. They weren't controls guys. And the unique thing that evolved out of that, it's kind of like get people together for a band and you don't know what necessarily music will come out, right? Mm-hmm. This wasn't the original plan, but what came out of it was these guys knew standard computer and PC technology. And we built the first control system based on true standard computer industry hardware, an IBM XT motherboard with a real-time operating system, right? Yeah. And which then became an AT and, and the 386, 486, 586, the whole thing, and a standard programming language. We didn't invent one, we used C. And built libraries. So we had standard-based products, standard-based networking. We had high-speed multi-user networking and a standard programming language.
Wow.
It was a very different product line in the marketplace. And the company was, it was reasonably successful. And, we had lots of deployments. Sydney Opera House was all Teletrol. It was like unbelievable, right? Okay. For a small company that was in New Hampshire. So
for those of us that have never stumbled upon a Teletrol controlled building, what happened to them? What?
Okay, so they finally got acquired by Philips and merged with Cylon, and so they still are there. There were a couple of generations. The product generations I was there for were called the integrator line, and then they moved on and they did other things, and so that company got absorbed into Philips and stuff. So it didn't go away; it just got acquired and merged and that type of thing. But anyways, I left there after a while and I went to a company called Solutions Direct, 2-person startup based out of Atlanta, Georgia. We were the very first authorized Echelon Lawnworks distributor in the US. They had set a couple up internationally. We were the first one in the US. We sold lawn gear, but more than Echelon products, we accumulated, I believe, the very first product line from all these companies who were building a lawn-based sensor, a lawn-based this, a lawn-based, nobody had a LAN-based full automation system, but there are a lot of people who had launched LAN-based things.
Okay.
And we pulled it all together. And in January of 97, we had a store on the internet. We could buy stuff. That's pretty early.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
You know, hand coding the HTML on the website and all that type of stuff.
Can you give people some context on LAN? Because I think there are some beginners that may not have even stumbled on that yet. So can you?
Echelon, you know, created a Silicon Valley company, created a control system network based on real advanced networking technology, kind of, you know, like Ethernet-like and whatever, different of course, and offered that to the market as a commercial product that was going to standardize communications and control systems to get away from this highly fragmented, highly proprietary, you know, BACnet was still a gleam. It was just emerging at the time, right? So there was a huge protocol wars of the 90s. It was BACnet and LAN. Which camp are you in, James? You know,
Okay.
Which was, you know, and
I was still in fifth grade, so it wasn't in a camp yet.
Right. Okay. But, you know, I had always believed in standards. That was just a kind of a thing. And that's why the whole idea of standard technology and Teletrol and then standard networking. And so, you know, I was a big proponent of it at the time. And anyway, so we were the first authorized.
BACnet won the war back then?
Yeah, absolutely. BACnet won the war. I don't think that there's still LAN systems out there. You don't hear that much about it.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's a lot of factors. I think the highly commercial approach that Echelon took, they really put a lot of restrictions on the companies who are going to use their technology. And made it difficult. Well, you know, I went back to Andover and we implemented some LAN products, but the big challenge was you couldn't make them user programmable easily. Okay. They really had a mindset of fixed function, configurable, terminal unit mentality, right? Well, great. So now I can do just a little stuff, right? And I think that was, in my opinion, that was a big barrier to their adoption. So anyways, but then I go back to Andover. And, you know, one of the things I'm very proud of is I am tied for the record as a 3-time repeat offender. No one will ever beat it. So there were 3 of us who were 3-time repeat offenders. So anyways.
A lot of people leaving and going back, it sounds like.
Yeah. So I ran the systems group there. And then I took over as VP of product development during the final stages of Continuum. And now this web technology is emerging. We ran some, you know, development projects on it and stuff. And I go to a trade show in The Hague, a LawnWorks show, because we were showing off our LawnWorks stuff. And I met these guys who were showing me this box, this brown box, that's all web-based, right?
Okay.
It was Jerry Frank and Gil Rockwell of Tridium.
Okay.
And they were there because they had one of the only independent integrations to LawnWorks networking that wasn't based on technology, you know, buying stuff from Echelon. They had network management tools that you needed with this network and all that. And that was very unique for someone to have an independently developed one. And they supported BACnet.
Okay.
So both, right? Anyways, I was really impressed and, you know, brought back the thoughts with web-based stuff and all of that. And months later, I got a call from Jerry. Why don't you come down and join us? And I'm like, I'm kind of like, you know, busy here, VP of product development, Andover controls, you know, no, you got to come down and talk. So I went down, I joined them. And
they were local to you, right?
No, they were, you know, Andover's up in Massachusetts. They were down in Richmond, Virginia. I went down there, moved the whole family, pulled the plug, did all that, went down and joined them. There were about 33 people when I had joined, and they were just getting ready to close that first Series A VC round.
Got it.
And I came into Tridium. And when I resigned, and, you know, the CEO of Andover had been really good to me, and I resigned, you know, it was a little painful. And what are you going to do? Well, we're going to make a software platform. We're going to sell it to controls companies. And John, I hate to see you throw your career away, man. I mean, you're a really bright young guy. I mean, no one will ever buy software from another company.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Seriously, that actually happened. That's true. And so that was a great challenge, right? So anyways, went there, spent a few years there, left, you know, joined him in 2000, left in 2006 after they'd been acquired by Honeywell. Okay, so I stayed on a while after that and then left. And mainly because I got recruited to go join another company called Perveris. security technology, user authentication based on biometrics that worked with your computer, worked with your door locks, could work with cars. And it was really forward-thinking stuff. But the security industry is very different.
Okay.
So we'll leave it at that for the moment. We haven't have a lot of time. My joke, I think, to you in the email was, yeah, security technology, danger, Will Robinson.
I had to Google that.
Anyways, that has spent a few years there. That company didn't make it. In fact, some of the patents got sold to Apple.
Oh,
because the whole idea of authenticating on an intelligent device, they had good patents on that and all that stuff. Anyways,
okay.
So I went independent for a while after that,
right.
and I was a consultant to Constellation Energy on their real-time demand response end-to-end platform. And what end-to-end was key there, they were in the deregulated side of the market. They ran the U.S.'s largest trading desk for demand and consumption. They had a trading desk on the third floor, which was like Wall Street, right? And the whole goal was they could arbitrage demand response with where they could sell it. And so I went in as a systems design consultant along with Anno Schulten, and we designed the architecture and system and requirements. And then they had an internal and external team of people build that to the point that they would recruit people to join the program. It was called VirtuWatt. And they would dispatch automatically instead of calling you on the phone and saying, hey, why don't you shut something down? You've agreed that I can do things to your buildings and you get paid for it. But of course, they were arbitraging on the back end, and
they're making money off of it.
And this was a working system business model for them. I'm not sure of the status of it today. It was called VirtuWatt.
What year was that?
So that is 90. No, rather, let's see, where are we now? I remember 2009.
Okay.
Yeah, 2009, right? Preveris ended this 2009.
Okay.
And so I'm consulting to them, but not full time, and I'm doing some other gigs. And I'm trying to get someone introduced me to people at Cisco, and I'm hoping to get a consulting gig there. They bought a product line. They're going to get into smart and connected buildings. They need a consultant, great. And instead, they flew out, met me, and said, "Well, we don't want a consultant. We want to hire you."
Okay. And this is like the mediator when
the mediator is the product they had bought in, but the initiative was bigger than just the mediator. It was called Smart and Connected Buildings, right? Which was under smart and connected, infrastructure, so there was smart cities, smart buildings. The whole idea, which I thought was compelling, was that control, automation, data, it'll be just part of the fabric of the network because everything has to be networked. So, and you got heavy duty processing power in all the network environment. Why not? It's control plane as well.
Okay.
Right?
Interesting.
And also that they, we're going to reinvent this Byzantine backwards industry and completely change it overnight, like they had changed the phone industry with IP phones. And they'd been so successful with that in my opinion, that was a great blind spot for them. They assumed every industry could be reinvented like that in the same way. That didn't happen, as I think we all know. Okay. All right. And so I left the air. But in between Constellation and Cisco, Brian and Frank and I got back together. He had now left Tridium. I had left in 06. He left in 08. We got together, started talking. Hey, what are you doing? We worked on a business plan together. What's next? Okay. So we started it before I went to Cisco, but then I was dedicated to that. And I left Cisco. I came back to him and he says, come on down. I've been building software.
I've been building stuff.
He's been building stuff based on the early stuff that we had thought about and everything. And I really hadn't been talking to him when I was at Cisco. And that was Foundry. And it's like, I go down and talk to him. He goes, look at this data stuff, data. What do you think? Wow, that looks really interesting. You think we can pay the mortgages? Wow, let's give it a shot, And so we get started in, the company was formed in 2009, but we went to market with the first product the fall of 2010, the first version of SkySpark. And, so we're certainly early in data and analytics. However, we always have to give credit to Jim Lee, who was doing it out of Symmetrics. And I don't think anybody, I certainly didn't really understand what he was doing. But we get into this and Brian, created a software platform that is, the foundation of SkySpark. And that's where we are today. And we've been out in the market for 11 years now.
Yeah. And we finally just got to where young James just graduated from his last semester of college. So that whole story was like right before my career began. So just to catch everyone up on you and I, so I started using SkySpark when I was, say, 2-3 years out of school. So they were, Towson Technologies was in St. Louis. I was in St. Louis, and they were a reseller, and SkySpark was kind of powering the back end of their platform. And so that was when I started using SkySpark.
Oh, okay.
And then obviously we started working together once I became a reseller a couple of years after that. And so
I didn't know the early part of that story, honestly.
Yeah. They were Towson was providing the software, and we were using it. I was at a mechanical contractor, and we were using their software on a couple different big deployments.
Cool. Yeah. It's a tangled web, huh? Our
Absolutely.
industry.
Yes, it is. So I want to dig into Tridium and SkySpark specifically, but let's start with given all of that, given the history that you know about. I mean, you mentioned different facets of it, hardware versus software, the trouble Cisco had sort of like changing the industry. So why do you think this industry is behind from a technology standpoint?
So I know that's your favorite question. Okay. And you want to ask everybody
the premise of it.
No, I do. But I'd reword it. Why is the adoption of technology behind?
Yep.
I won't go to say the technology's behind. This industry's invented a lot of firsts. I can give you some examples, and the first thing I'd say is the word split. Split financial incentives, split responsibilities, split buying centers, split domain knowledge, right? There's so much complexity of different systems in a building. This desire to compare them to a car, I completely disagree with. Right?
Totally.
Okay. The only car you might compare with is, a custom built car you see on, Motor Trend TV, where they go to the junkyard and they weld all this stuff together and put, cars are mass produced, tightly coupled. Buildings are bespoke, loosely coupled. That's a huge problem. The other thing is the long capital cycle that dominates the majority of the investment in a building. Yeah. Right. You put stuff in a building that has short capital cycle, but 95% of it has long capital cycle. That's how it's financed. That's how it's thought of. Right. Those are the things that cause slower adoption. It's frustrating. I think there's been belief throughout the years that, a technology solution can break this apart. I don't believe that's true because of those reasons. They're all there, and they're just part of the reality of the built environment. And I think we'd be better off, instead of wishing that some magic technology will make it go away, to understand where are the pain points, where are the bottlenecks, how can we ease them and improve this. I see this as incremental, something we can incrementally improve, not something we can snap our fingers and will go away. And yesterday was this. And so I firmly believe that. So anyways.
Yeah, I like the word split. I use the word silos a lot. I also been using the word handovers a lot. There are just so many different handover points where, especially from a digitization standpoint, just stuff just gets lost. And, that adds up over and over and over again to, slower adoption. I think maybe I'll change my question. I've been debating on whether to just retire the question or just modify it a little bit, but I still love the answers that I'm getting. So
that's why I wouldn't give up on the question, because I think it's helped informing the audience to think that this is maybe some simple problem that, we're just all dense and we haven't figured it out. Right. And that's not helping anybody. We need to understand the reality of the problem if we're going to address different pieces. But your idea of handoffs, the handoffs are between the split areas of responsibility. I'm responsible to design it. You got to build it. He's got to operate it. You've got to optimize it, and they need to improve the energy efficiency. Hey, my job was done. I designed it. So I'm gone, right? And they're gone. They're not even around typically. So I think that's a really important perspective we all need to keep in mind as we keep improving, digitizing and hopefully improving the built environment.
Yeah, totally. So let's talk about Tridium. So given when I started my career, I think, I first heard about Jace's like pretty early on. And the concept was, get data into the analytics. Like that's what I've been doing for a long time. But I haven't really ever had like a history lesson around, the early days of Tridium, so before Honeywell acquired it. So you hinted at it a little bit. We're going to go sell software to all these controls companies. Can you just give us a history lesson on
yeah,
Tridium?
so they started in the late 90s in the basement of Jerry Frank's house with Brian Frank and later Andy Frank, who was a little younger, and John Sublett. And the key concepts were, number one, move to IP and web technologies. And now this is really early to do that. In fact, the web technologies couldn't do everything you wanted. They couldn't completely emulate a state-of-the-art Windows-based building automation system, but they had a belief that it would. And the other thing was unifying protocols, being able to bring all the different protocols together so that they work together. So drivers to different protocols in one box, right, with a unified data model to do control, though. It was primarily about doing control, right, and serving results in a standard browser. So your UI, there was no more fat client, you used a browser. And, in the very early days where you couldn't do, a sophisticated things, spinning fans and all that as the fancy Windows apps. But that caught up, right? Because look at what the IT industry, the investment in the web and web technologies, right? And so there was an Niagara version framework, version 1. Hardly anybody ever worked with that. And then there was what's called R2, which was widely deployed. And then there was AX and now Niagara 4. But the other thing about the business model was they really believed their intent was to sell this software platform to the major OEMs, right? Not to, we're going to stand up a company to compete directly with Honeywell or Johnson or Siemens, whatever. It was intended to be a software platform sale. And of course, I made that earlier comment. That was odd. That was different. That was not well understood and accepted, but it did happen. Every major company has a product line based on Niagara, right? Whether it's Honeywell or Siemens or Johnson, Schneider, they all ended up with products based on it. Maybe not every product they sell, but it became a universal platform for connecting to diverse systems, solving that BACnet, LawnWorks, Modbus, and hundreds of other proprietary protocols, right? I mean, literally hundreds, so that people could connect to the reality of what they owned. And remember, we may talk about the challenges of the new standard protocols and the new, generation of APIs, but wheel back 20 years, it was proprietary protocols everywhere you turned, RS-45 networks. And, that means it's a serial bus. That means you've got hardware involved. It's not just clean IP protocol conversion. So you had to have physical hardware to do that, right? You had to have the board level stuff. So, but it became successful because it solved problems for the system integrators and contractors who, even if they were dedicated to pick a brand, they're going to sell a project, there's other stuff in the building. Right. Even if it isn't Honeywell competing with Johnson, there's meters and there's this and there's that. The idea that one company could build everything that would go into every project and it would all be one protocol, it's flawed.
Right.
Okay. But none of those majors could see it in their own interest to embrace everybody else's systems. That was key, right? Yeah. And you used to say when we were talking and selling at OEMs, we used to say, your engineering team's just as smart as ours. They could do this, except you can't bring yourself to let them. Integrate to all these. And the other thing is, if you invest all the time in a platform where there's this huge amount of engineering to support multiple protocols, you'll only be able to amortize that over your sales. We're building a platform that we get to amortize it over everybody who uses it. You write a driver and it gets used 100 or 1,000 times. If you write a driver, you get to use it twice. Right? How do you amortize that? So it became an economic model. So the technology was important, the strategy was important, but the economic model was a reality that this is a horizontal problem to solve.
Yeah,
that's what Tridium Niagara, and that's why even today, it continues to have incredible momentum because it solves a horizontal problem, right? That still exists today, even if less and less are old proprietary 45 networks. There's still, we used to joke, we love protocols.
Yeah.
right? Bring on a new standard. That only makes more reason you need our system.
Yeah, that only makes the flywheel even accelerate faster.
Yeah.
Talk to me about, like, was there a system integrator before this? Because, like, what tools did they use to do it? Or was it a bunch of contractors that had
Sure.
different
No, there were.
distributor
No,
agreements?
they were they weren't the first people to identify the problem. It was the first time it got commercially solved in a big way at
Okay.
Teletrol. I told you we believed in standards. We built a tool set called the Open Protocol Bus. You, system integrator, could write drivers to other systems. We didn't have the team that we were going to start writing drivers and selling them.
Okay.
Whereas Tridium did focus and invest in that, more capital to do it. But we had the tool, and if you were a programmer, you could write, and people wrote drivers. And one of the big integrations we did at Teletrol was between ASI controls, terminal unit controls, which were a major breakthrough, based on custom silicon, terminal unit controls, right?
Okay.
And they had a protocol, and they were getting tremendous pickup by major property developers because they dramatically lowered the cost of putting DDC down to the zone level. You know what they didn't have? Anything beyond the zone level. So at Teletrol, we did an integration with them and did some of the biggest skyscrapers in the US for Heinz because we had the big controllers and almost no terminal. And they had all the terminal unit and no big controllers. And we did that, and it looked like one system. So this was being solved.
Okay.
But Tridium saw the vision of a horizontal platform to do it, and the business model, and had the resources brought together to make that a product. So when somebody said, "Well, I got a protocol," we didn't, they didn't say, "Well, go try to write it yourself with this kit if you know your way around programming." It was like, "Okay, we'll write it," and they built and built and built. There's hundreds of protocols supported Absolutely. Out there today. So.
What was the acquisition like? Obviously, they built the business and you joined it to sell software to the OEMs. And then one of the OEMs comes and buys. Like, can you talk about
Yeah, we were shocked. Yeah, so I'll put a little context just to that to help. I mean, the industry had some major downturns there, right? This was the first stage of the web, and so Tridium's out there, and we've got some great projects. One of our big customers was Enron Energy Services. They were building, they called it a negawatt utility, where they could do demand response, and they had one of the other big trading desks, so they could, all right? And they're a big customer because we gave them technology at Tridium that could do this, right?
Yeah.
Remote telemetry, command and control, interface to your systems, control demand and all that type of stuff. But remember what happened in 2001, right? 9/11, Enron, the scandal, right?
Yep.
And then the collapse of, the overhyped web.
Right. Yeah.
So Tridium was moving forward, but, now the investment community is like vanished from the face of the earth, and we needed additional funding to continue on with the plan. Anyways, the capital structure and control changed, and it put other people other than the founders, with majority ownership. And they, after a number of years, when we became successful and profitable, they decided they wanted to exit. Management team wanted to do buyout. We tried that, but in the end, a company, came calling, and Honeywell saw. Now Honeywell's a customer. Honeywell Webs was based on Tridium Niagara. It was becoming incredibly successful, and they pursued the acquisition process, and we got acquired by Honeywell. We never thought that one of our customers could acquire us, because will Honeywell still sell to Johnson and Siemens and Schneider? And they did. They left that alone.
Yeah.
But then the other question is, will those companies continue to buy?
Right.
And an interesting thing is that I learned through that process is Honeywell and Johnson sell stuff to each other all the time.
Okay.
This happens. Nobody wants to talk about it, but this happened, and that was able to be navigated. So the company continued on with what it's viewed as the independent, but all of the brands that were selling it also, the Johnson FX became an incredibly successful product, and on and on and on. So that's a little bit of perspective on that. And I left a while, as I said, after Honeywell acquired it to do the security company. So.
Okay.
Hey guys, just another quick note from our sponsor, Nexus Labs, and then we'll get back to the show. This episode is brought to you by Nexus Foundations, our introductory course on the smart buildings industry. If you're new to the industry, this course is for you. If you're an industry vet but want to understand how technology is changing things, this course is also for you. The alumni are raving about the content, which they say pulls it all together, and they also loved getting to meet the other students on the weekly Zoom calls and in the private chat room. You can find out more about the course at courses.nexuslabs.online. All right, back to the interview. All right, last thing on Tridium. What do you think about it today? We're 15 years after you left, something like that. Is it the same place you thought it'd be, or is it different?
Well, when big companies acquire small companies, things change, the culture changes, and things like that. So I think you see that in U.S. market overall. Big companies have trouble innovating. That's why startups do it and startups get acquired, right? So there's a life cycle to rapid innovation and, pioneering innovation that, big companies have a hard time, with funding innovation that doesn't have a really good calculated ROI. Hey, we're going to build this. We don't know whether it's going to be successful. What? No, you're not.
Right.
So that's why. So, I think it's created opportunity, but it's still the most adopted platform out there for doing control and a major data source for companies like ours who are taking the data to create value.
Yep. Cool. Let's talk about Foundry now. So go back to you came back from Cisco, you and Brian got together in your basement.
Well, we started before that. After the security company, wasn't going to make it and had to be refactored. I told the board one of the first people to leave should be me, right? We've got an asset here that you can work with, but in a totally different way. And I left, and so I'm independent. Brian and I get together. We'd worked obviously closely through the years of Tridium and the success there, although in totally different roles, right? I mean, Brian's running the brain trust up on the 4th floor and I'm running the business down on the 3rd floor. And people would be surprised how little, we actually talked during those years. Right? But anyways, we got together and started talking about this stuff. And, I've mentioned that our original business plan, we look carefully at what's happening with the cloud, Amazon Web Services and all that stuff. And, this whole idea of maybe all the BS applications will move to the cloud, right? So we had thoughts around that. We also started looking at this data and it just kind of emerged in an interesting word, because that's what we say, patterns emerge from data with analytics. With these ideas around, hey, there's something that could be done here with the data that isn't trying to displace a controls company. Nobody's doing it. Nobody's truly working with the data other than putting it up on a screen and making fans spin, right? And that's another point we can get into. Personal note of, I believe color graphics are the tail that's been wagging the dog of BAS since the early 90s and has been one of the greatest misuses of resources in mankind's history.
To come back to that.
We can come back to that one. But anyways, so we saw this opportunity and, Brian went off on, the deeper thought about how to work with data while I was, paying my bills, consulting and stuff like that. But anyways, he started building stuff around that while I'm off at Cisco. And then we come back and he says, we got something and already got a couple of people. And, he goes, I don't want to be answering the questions on the phone and getting on the plane and going out to meet the potential customers. Come on down. And we started. When I left Cisco, I had not yet called Brian. I made a decision to leave for my own reasons. And then I called and say, hey, by the way, and he's like, get down here. Because I didn't know all he'd been doing because he was, of course, doing stealth mode, building this out. We got going, and with version 1, I mean, we secured Kohl's department store, nationwide. Huge project still running to this day with one of our leading system integrators, ESI, who's now a division of CBRE, right? And, it quickly showed people how they can get more value out of their systems by working with the data, right? To identify issues, problems, patterns, the whole series of benefits you get by using data to generate value. And it went well from there. And then we've been incredibly fortunate with the company, great technology. And we got exposed to the GSA Fast 50 project at the time and had the opportunity to present to consultants involved in that. And we got approved to be part of that. And our technology ended up being selected for the GSA Fast 50, which became GSA Link, which, based on any public information we have available, is the world's single largest analytics project for the built environment, now over 100 of the largest GSA facilities, over 55 million square feet. And that, that was critically important for us, both as a sale, but also as validation and proof points. The GSA was and is very serious about running their buildings efficiently.
Oh yeah, and when I was at NREL, I had a chance to work on a couple of those buildings a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah. Before we dive into that, what were the other options? You mentioned Jim at Symmetrics. Like, what was analytics at the time?
Yeah, I only know that Jim Lee at Symmetrics was doing it. I'm not aware anybody else was. The story I tell about that is the first year I went to, Realcomm. Even before they had the IBCon, went to Realcomm and we got a 10-foot booth. And, I'm known because I've been around with, hey, John, what are you doing now? Well, we're doing data. And I'd explain to people and they'd go, what are you doing? Tell me, explain that again. Seriously, right? Because nobody was doing it. And, I think the point here is about society in general is learning how to use data. This is a trend across every industry, right? Learning how to use data to generate value. And in our industry, one of the statements I make is that, the data that a device produces is more valuable than the device. And people go, whoa, wait a minute. No. Okay, you got a VAV box. What did it cost you? $500. Yeah. Run it wrong for a year. Okay. Well, certainly can't apply to a chiller. What did that cost you? $30,000. Okay, run it wrong for a year.
Right. Yeah.
Right. I actually say it to make people, basically react, because this is the point: is the data is critical to everything, right? I like to make the analogies. I mean, how do you think they know when the optimal time to put bathing suits on the racks are in a department store? You think somebody's going, maybe this week? I don't think so.
Right.
They're using data, right? And what type, in what area, for what demographic? It's analytics. Well, why don't we have the same tools in buildings, right? But I don't believe there were a lot of options. Somebody may come forward and say they were doing it too, from what we saw that, and our big difference was we weren't doing it as a service in line with, our past and our mindset and Brian Frank's development capabilities. We were going to build a platform to do it that anybody could use. We weren't going to, we'll offer it as a service, you got to come to us. It was, we're going to build a platform so the entire world of system integrators and engineering firms, they can implement analytics for their customers, a software platform. Yeah, and that's a different mindset, right? If you're going to make shrink wrap commercial off-the-shelf software, that's different than saying, I'm going to build some software I got in the back room that I can use and glue together to do project work. Right. It's a whole different mindset, development requirements, et cetera.
And where did that mindset come in? You're saying that was developed at Tridium?
No, we're product guys. I'm a product guy, except the stuff I went to school, the build was made out of metal, right? Yeah. And Brian, that's his mindset on software, is he builds products.
Totally.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And so what was the decision at the time? Because SkySpark is a platform for people like me, the nerds, and the people that want to set things up for their clients usually, right?
Right.
What was the decision at the time to go that way? Like, why did you do that versus a more sort of off the shelf, like you said, SaaS product?
Oh, instead of SaaS, yeah. Well, so there were two reasons for that. One, we were bootstrapped, and you need a whole different financial backing if you're going to go direct to end customers, have nationwide, worldwide sales forces and project delivery capability. And I had mentioned I ran a sizable system integration group. There were 3 of them at Andover Controls before I took over product development. And being a system integrator and doing project work, as you know, is a different business than building products. You have different accounting systems, different requirements. I mean, they are night and day, right? And I didn't enjoy it. Okay. I realized, no, I'm not a contractor.
Right.
Okay. I'm a product guy. That's what I went to school for. It's funny. My best friend in life, he became a contractor. He's unbelievably successful, but I would never do what he did for the last 30 years of his life. Right. 5 o'clock in AM in the truck. No, I don't want to do that. Contracting is 24-hour day, really tough. Right. It's a very tough, but it's, it fits a certain type of people. It's, there's certain types of people. So we knew we weren't going to do that. And the whole SaaS thing, that's a separate question. When I joined Brian, we went out with the original business, or in fact, before we went to market, back in the consulting stages, we took different business plans out to people we knew, mutual respect, and talked to them. And as much as this cloud stuff was really interesting, we came away with the belief that if we are cloud only, that's key, we can say goodbye to 50% of the market. You can say what you want. There are companies who can't move their data to the cloud, be dependent on a cloud, whatever.
Yep. Okay.
But that's not to say cloud is bad. And in fact, our platform is extensively used by service providers who use it as a cloud platform. But we built a platform for that could be used as a cloud platform or could be deployed on premise. On-site. Again, it's a standard product. The third part of your question is how we decided to go to market. So, early days of Andover, I got towed around by the sales guys as they were building a distribution network. I didn't even know what that meant. All I knew was, John, you coming with me. We're going to, Oshkosh, right? Okay, we're going to meet a system integrator. In fact, they weren't even called that. We're going to meet a dealer. A dealer? Of what?
Yeah, okay.
Okay. No, a dealer. They sell, okay. And you get dragged around and learn. So I learned the ropes of distribution while I was there. And then at Teletrol, I built one. Right. Yep. Led building one of my own. And then I went back to Andover and I worked with them. And at Proveris, we went through a distribution channel. So I've had 30 plus years of understanding what's the value chain that puts technology in buildings.
Yep.
Right? Building owners don't buy a lot and install a lot of stuff on their own.
Yeah.
So to us, it was obvious we're going to go through distribution. One, we're not going to hire a worldwide sales force. We will work with companies who are the worldwide sales force. And number two, the implementation. I mean, that's the biggest part of the job. Those companies specialize in that, right? So, we work with reseller partners. Some of them are what you'd call a control system integrator. Yeah. But others are specialty engineering firms. There are a lot of, they're what you would consider consulting engineering firms who use our software to deliver their services, their analysis, their commissioning, their continuous monitoring-based commissioning. And then we have the service providers who are monitoring buildings as a service, right? Using our software to monitor and analyze and dispatch or consult or recommend or all of those different types of things. So.
Okay. That makes perfect sense looking back. How big is Sky Foundry today?
Yeah, so the metrics we focus on are the external market metrics. So, we have, back in 2017, we validated that our software was used in over 1 billion square feet of facilities worldwide, over 15,000 facilities. It's now, over 20,000 facilities, best we can get. It's actually harder to get the data because we have so many service providers who are monitoring buildings and they are not required to tell us, Right. You're right. They don't. So we have that, and we have our 150 plus partners worldwide. With the software is installed on 6 continents around the world. So it's become very well adopted around the world. Our team is small, if that's your question. We're an 8-person company.
Wow.
So
that's awesome.
Yeah, it is. It is. But invested a lot in building tools and backend and processes and automation everywhere, right? Like kind of eat our own dog food on how you should address, these data challenges and stuff.
Totally. So, all right. So where's the product going in the future? So, I'm going to assume that people understand the concept of collecting data into the platform, fault detection, that kind of thing. And what's the future of fault detection and analytics, and what's the future of SkySpark?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I want to break those out. In our mind, those are 2 different things. Okay. All right. So we make a software platform for data analytics for the built environment, the types of devices, equipment, sensors. Okay. Fault detection is one use. I consider it a subcategory, an important one, of analytics. But there's other things you do with data, right? It isn't all about finding something broken. It's predictive. It's finding things degrading, right? That's not a fault, right? It's knowing. It's tracking KPIs. How many service calls do I have on this brand of equipment versus this brand? I know what I'm buying for the next 20 stores, right? Yeah. How do different building styles perform? I've got 3 different designs in my portfolio. Which one should I build next, right? It's working with data, and the purposes and understanding of what we can do with data. That's a journey. We're all learning more and more. So, that example about tracking service calls against vendor of HVAC, that comes from one of our customers. We didn't not think of that often, right? One of the other one is true story, orientation of the sun. Okay. It's a quote from a customer, right? You're supposed to do the consultative selling, right? So what would be helpful to you, James, to track so you can compare your portfolio, around energy? Can you do analysis around orientation to the sun? And I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, I'm tired of management complaining to me that all of these stores are using too much energy, John. What is wrong with you in those stores? Well, you see, they're convenience stores. They have a glass front, and all of those stores are facing due south. Stop torturing every month to tell you 100 times over.
Wow. Okay.
Okay. I didn't come up with that insight.
No.
What is that? That's data and analytics and a customer use case of how data could be meaningful to them. Pretty well.
Absolutely.
So stores, he's finally going to be able to filter them out. So he stops getting, the C-suite looking at him and going, you're running those stores inefficiently. No, they're cited wrong or cited inefficiently, whatever, So
and that's one of the things I love about SkySpark is I felt as someone who is serving a building owner that anything they asked me, I could then go back to my programmer and say, create this KPI or create this,
analysis report correlation, right? And that's again, that was our goal. Fault detection happens to be a key thing that people can get their head around, right? One of the concerns we have is that narrows people's view of why data is important and what you can do with it. It isn't all just about, and in fact, and this is public knowledge, one of the things that came out of the GSA Link project and studies they've done to prove it. They've had Carnegie Mellon analyze the project and verify the financial returns. They saved, I believe, approximately 50% of their savings came from maintenance and repair operations savings.
Okay.
It wasn't just energy, right? And the other side of that, and so you'd say, well, that means faults. No, it means knowing what a building needs before a truck goes there and gets there and says, well, I haven't got the stuff to fix it. I'll come back tomorrow with another truck roll. And that's another thing. But your question is where it's going, and I'll answer that with one of our most recent additions that you didn't notice and mention, which we appreciate, which was we built a complete workflow system in the product. Okay, because analytics finds patterns in the data that have value and meaning, right? And I remember being on stage with one of our one of the most notable guys in our industry is now retired, Paul Oswald. We were speaking at a RealCom, and him and I both on the panel, right? And as you can tell, we like to joke a bit and stuff like that. And he says, "Hang on to your seat, John, because I'm gonna really get the audience here." And we're talking about analytics, and he gets up and he says, "Well, I want to let everybody in the audience know analytics doesn't save any money."
I can picture that in the RealCom. Yeah.
It was great, right? And everybody goes dead silent, So what are John and I doing here? Right? Well, the point is, it tells you what you need to address.
Yep.
If you get analytic results that say, James, this is broken, it's not operating right, it's inefficient, and you do nothing about it, you will save no money. So the analytics starts a workflow process. Now, we had lots of input over the years from our partners, big and small, who are dealing with this, right? Because we think, in the early stages, hey, I told you something's broken, James, go fix it,
Right.
But, it's more complicated than that. And we took input for, this is a clear case of a product feature taking more time to design and define than to code. We took input for multiple years on what people needed to do, right? We had people interfacing our software with our open APIs with standard CMMS, the Maximo, the Archibus, all of that stuff. And that can solve it for certain people, right? Automatically generate a work order, right? And then it gets assigned and all that. But you know what? Those systems are pretty heavyweight, right? And oftentimes not every operator can, not everybody gets to touch those things, right? You're a technician, you may get your work assignment from it, but you never touch it. That's, with analytics, you're in there looking at something, the guy who knows the chiller plant needs to create something. So anyways, we implemented a very comprehensive workflow tool set we call ARC, meaning the arc of the life of an issue. That's where the name came from, because that's what it has. It has an arc of a story, an arc of a life. And we implemented that in the product, and it's lightweight, it's fast, it's easy. And while you're looking at a problem, you can create an arc. You could create a work order you could assign, or you could just flag it saying, what's going on here, right? You don't have to know, I'm going to assign it to this person and due date it, and it has these, you can just say, whoa, capture this, right? So someone else will see it. And that was really, I mean, it could virtually be a product on its own. It was a really huge addition that we understood the problem, but we were working on how do you solve this, again, because people are using our software for so many different things, right? So we created the idea of a note, which is just, hey, flag something and write something. We also created the idea of a ticket, because one of the things you're working with Brian, fixing software defects are typically called tickets. And they actually progress differently than a work order where I got to get a wrench and a filter and a valve and I got to replace it. Okay. So there's a distinction. And the other thing we did, because everything's programmable in SkySpark, you can completely define your own workflow documents, your own arc. So you're not fixed with what we did. We built like defaults. Build your own with as many stages, as many tags, as many descriptors, as many fields. Take your workflow and you can adapt Arc to exactly meet it, right? And that was always a thought process in our software. People would say, well, what's your data model that people have to employ? Data model, not data modeling technique. We're, of course, a founder of Haystack. And we'd say, no, the purpose of SkySpark's database technology is you should be able to model anything you have. I don't know the model of your equipment systems, you do. You better be able to model it the way you want in our software. And Haystack tags allowed people to do that, and that became our fundamental methodology for doing semantic modeling. So anyways, that shows where we're going. It's really addressing more and more of the process of using data to generate value, right? And so we have a number of other things in the works that, the development schedule is always full with things. We'll be introducing another major app here, probably in the next 60 days that, we'll make some noise about, because it brings in yet another use case that people want to do with their data, and they want to do it in an easier, simpler way. So we've kind of appified it, right? One of the other things we appified, if you will, was a tariff engine, right? So the idea that you want to calculate energy costs, you want to relate energy savings, you need to make a calculation. And what do most people do? It's 12 cents a kWh. You can put a metric on things that, hey, that's a big problem or a small one, but energy rates don't work that way, right? You could use more energy and pay less depending on your rate, or you could use the same and pay less if you get on the right rate and all that. So this very kind of like non-linear factor on energy is the tariff rate and their complexity. So years ago, we built a tariff engine so that you could define all the charges associated with your tariff rate, distribution, transmission, peaks, and time of day, time of year, taxes, service charges, block and range, and on and on and on. We had people from Europe, Oceania, US contribute, so we could hopefully build a model that would work for everybody. And then more recently, we built a GUI so it's easy to enter the charges, or perceptibly easier to enter the charges. Because we always told people, don't worry about the coding of the rate. Your biggest problem is, can you read the document you get from the utility company? That's where people most likely had to hire a consultant, right? And then you had to enter it.
What does that mean? Yeah, exactly.
Right. And then, so now it's a point and click to enter it, but now people realize, it's really reading the document, right? So anyways, but that was another use case we built into the software, the workflow. We've got another one coming, and we'll continue, because this, one of the things we say, analytics is a journey for us, for our product, for customers, for society. It's not going away.
Awesome. Well, let's circle back to your graphics. I want to hear about your graphics being the tail wagging the dog.
Well, you ever read about crows and how they build their nests?
Nope.
Okay. They're very much like shiny objects.
Okay.
So they pick them up and embed them in their nests. Certain birds like shiny objects. And so I call it the shiny object problem.
Okay.
Right? Okay. That, look what we can do. And it is cool. But one of the things that got me to have this opinion is when I saw, being a system integrator and being involved in implementing controls, this is pre-analytics days, more money was being spent in the bid to draw pictures of the equipment than to do good control sequences.
Yeah.
That's not right.
No.
That's not right.
No.
Okay. You know why? Because it's easier mentally to do that than to think about complex, sophisticated controls that will really optimize sophisticated systems. But no, we had spinning fans. That was, bitmap was first with data that would change, 74.2. Then the fan spins. Now it's 3D. Now it's shaded from a 45-degree perspective, right?
Yeah.
What value have we increased, right? We've increased the sales value, whiz, bang, sizzle. But I would argue in some cases, we've diverted our attention, intellectual focus away from what matters, which is good, sophisticated control and control sequences, right? Mm-hmm. And so that was the point I was making about, the graphics being the tail that wagged the dog. And in development, companies who are building these products would end up putting more engineers on the next version of a graphics package than on doing more control algorithms that would run better.
Yeah,
right?
And I think that same thing's happening with SaaS products today with digital twins, things like that are out there. And
it's not that they don't have value. In our presentation, I say, I need to look at pictures of my equipment from time to time. Mm-hmm. But I have 5,000 pieces of equipment. That can't be how I glean information about what's happening right and wrong in my building today. Totally. It can't be. It's impossible, right? Totally. And that's the value where analytics comes in. So that was the point I was alluding to there with my sarcastic comment, I guess. So.
Love it. I love those anecdotes. Commentary on the industry is just quite funny sometimes.
Yeah, well, it's human. There's a lot of human nature going on here. So the shiny object problem, there you go. That's what I call it. All
right, let's talk about Haystack. So this could be a topic that we take more time to unpack on a future episode, but let's talk about the founding story at least today.
So you're talking about my evening job.
Yes. There you go. Yeah. Tell me about your night.
Yeah, let me tell you about my night job. I've been moonlighting for a while here. All right. So Brian and I get going, we're doing analytics, and he comes to me, right? I'm the industry guy, the domain guy. Brian's the software guy, software architecture. He comes to me, hey, John, one of the things involved in analytics is data preparation, data categorization and stuff. So go find the industry standard naming convention so that we'll be able to quickly categorize the data coming from these systems. And I said,
can I just say how hilarious that question is? Oh man,
it's great because Brian's a software guy, right? Yeah. And this is 2010 now, and,
oh man,
and okay. And, I go, hey, I may have missed something. Maybe Ashray published something. I do research. I said, okay. I come back to Brian. I go, no, there's nothing. He goes, no, there has to be, John. You can't have an industry with no, Brian, there's nothing. Man. Whoa. So he goes out and he looks at, what's happening with the early days of the semantic web. Think about Gmail, right? Remember, for years I had my email was on, with a big company, Microsoft Outlook, right? Mm. If you want to organize stuff, you had one tool, folders. And if you put an email in one folder, it is not in any other folder.
Yeah.
But if I put tags on an email, I can find it on this topic, so the whole tab. Anyways, he settled down to the right way to build a data modeling approach is with tags.
Okay.
We started doing it. He's working on. We get together and he goes, hey, this data tagging thing, he goes, this is critical. And this is not a competitive advantage. This is a barrier, like for us and for everybody. This should be solved. And so we had that conversation, and Brian had the vision, and then we started talking to some other people we knew and respect. We talked to people at some of the energy labs, by the way. Okay. And I tell the story this way. They said, yes, the industry needs to solve this problem. Well, great. Let's start an open source project and do it together. And they said, great. If we apply for a grant, we might get it in 2 years. Yeah. Just go do it. And so in March, we're celebrating the 10th year of Haystack. In March of 2011, we stood it up. About a dozen people are involved, stood up a server, and we turned over everything we'd done to make a functional product around tagging concepts, right? Which is still early. And we turned it over to open source under the academic free license. And we encourage, come help solve this problem together. It's open source. Let's work together. And people come and say, well, you guys don't know anything about electric distribution systems. I didn't say I did. Right? Yeah. You do. Hey, you just volunteered. In fact, that was Stephen Frank at NREL. He came in and he built out, using the methodology we defined, built out a haystack model for electrical distribution, metering systems, and all the tags you need to describe that stuff. And that's just a really key example of something that was really important. But the community came together, right? And that is key to what we did with Haystack. It's a true open source initiative. And I make a distinction, I think we did on one of the other calls. There are companies who do development and then make it available as open source. This was developed as open source through an open source collaborative initiative, which it was very different for our industry. In fact, I think it's been one of the challenges is the BIS industry is used to having standards handed to them. Right? This is the standard, right? And that doesn't mean you couldn't have participated, but the amount of people who participate in getting there is small in general, and the methods and the processes are rigid and complex and mind-numbing, right? And this was how's the software world solve problems? Open source, meritocracy. Here's a better solution to that problem.
Totally.
And that's what we did. And people came together and it developed, generation one, which was primarily the vocabulary. Let's all use the same words to mark up data. And then, in between generation 2 and 3, which enhanced that with the REST API for a standard way to query, right? And then of course, Haystack 4, which will be, finish its public review at the upcoming Haystack Connect in May, which is a virtual event, which implements taxonomies and ontologies and the ability for inference-based queries and RDF compatibility and all of those things that have come from openly collaborating, bringing in critique, complaint requirements to enhance the standard. So I'm the executive director. I kind of run the business side of it, even though I have some command of the technology, although this stuff's getting pretty sophisticated around data. And Brian's the lead curator still, but there's lots of people contributing. We have a lot of working groups where people run with it. They run with the methodology. They bring back the consensus. It gets reviewed by the curator or curators to make sure that the methodology, the standard was implemented. And, it's clearly the most deployed tagging semantic methodology out there. It's not the only one. There's a number of them out there. As you know, you've held some sessions on the different standards out there. So that's a little bit about where it's at. We're hosting what'll be our Haystack Connect 10-year anniversary meeting. Won't be in person, but it'll be the 4th biennial event we've had. Lots of speakers from around the world talking about advancing the standard, how they're using it. So that's a little bit about it. And your next question?
Well, I was going to tell you, so in 2015, so they're every 2 years, right? The Haystack
First one was in 2013, first event, then 15, 17, 19, 21.
I remember in 2015, I was just getting started at a new job. And so I was there for a month or so, and Haystack Connect was coming up, and I was like, I have to go. And I can remember explaining to a bunch of sort of non-analytics people, they're commissioning, energy management people, trying to explain what Haystack was first, and then trying to get the money to go. And I failed miserably.
Really?
But I can only imagine what it's been like for you for this entire time to explain what it is and why people should care. And like, it's such a difficult topic to explain.
Yeah. And the way I deal with it without going crazy is I relate to my own. Until you encounter the problem, you don't understand the need for the solution.
Exactly.
And that's the thing. If you're trying to get data from different systems and work with it, you have to have that data have a semantic model so it can be interpreted, right? And one of the big things is people say, well, I have standard protocols. Yeah, but the protocol doesn't tell you what it is. It just says, here's the name, here's the value. What is it? And one of the best examples I ever saw from this was when Tridium came out in support of it and John Sublett did a talk, he created a great analogy, which is, first of all, one of the key things we have to help people. Haystack is not a standard naming convention for BAS points. We don't tell people what to name. And the reason is you couldn't solve it that way. Your name is James Dice. Where do you live? What kind of car do you drive? Yeah. How old are you? What's your job? Those are all attributes about you. Oh, we're going to build them into your name. No, you're not going to build it into your name.
Yeah.
What do? It's a data record.
Yep.
And it has some structure, and your credit card company has it in one way and the bank has another, whatever, right? We need a way to capture those attributes in a normalized format that can be easily exchanged between software programs and be both machine readable and human readable. That's key, because one of the other things we did with that was come from the point of view of who's going to be at the front line of implementing this classification.
Yeah.
It's the technicians who are doing a control system, right? Right. The guys out there programming whatever. They're coming from domain knowledge. They need to be able to tag things and understand what they're doing, right? Absolutely. This is a supply, air, temp, sensor, degrees Fahrenheit, associated with HU1. They can understand that. You give them the vocabulary and the methodology, which again has been enhanced around, and they can do that. So we approached it from that end. In fact, when we talked to some researchers who are doing the semantic web, they said, "Oh, you're building a folksonomy."
Okay.
And we thought, well, that because they were at this, deep computer science, RDF layer, resource description, which, the new Haystack 4 supports RDF expression of the model. That's great, but you can't teach that to people doing buildings. Yeah. This is on PhD level, software engineering stuff. We approached it of what do people need to do? They need to classify what it is beyond the name. And so that had a lot to do with the philosophy and when we started. So, kind of ground up, right? And of course, we encountered the need to enhance it and grow the standard and, the acceptance. But yeah, if people don't understand the problem, they don't understand why we're doing this.
Yeah.
But once people do encounter it, and of course, now that more and more of the world is using data and there's numerous analytics companies out there, you're either doing this around a standard or you're building yet another proprietary bespoke solution that's only going to be useful for you. Why invest all that effort and maintenance of that? Let's work together to solve this together. So
awesome.
That was our idea.
That's awesome. Yeah, I ended up making it to the 2017 Haystack Connect because I did what every good project manager does, and I built it into one of my project budgets. And I funded my own way. I didn't have to
Saddlebrook. You were at Saddlebrook.
Yes, I was.
Outside Tampa. Yeah, it was a great event.
And that's where I met a lot of the people that are great members of Nexus Pro today. Tyson, Matt Schwartz, the people that I have great relationships with today started there.
Yeah, it's this is just part of the future. It has to be done. So let's all work together and have one standard. I'm sure you or others have heard my analogy, but I'll throw it out because I think it's so important, right? HTML. Without HTML, we wouldn't be able to work with each other's websites. I couldn't read what you posted. It's a defined way of marking up your publication, your website, the text, the graphics, the images, right? You can't have 5 of those out there. You can't have 3 of those out there. There's got to be one. And you know what? Guess what? Getting there from HTML1 to HTML5, there were years of debate, argument, and building things out. And extending feature sets. Look at what browsers can do today that they couldn't do with HTML. Great. That's part of the process, right? Okay. So, Haystack doesn't have this. Great. Come on in and let's extend it. And our ethos has been very open. And, we were the ones who reached out to Brick and AshRay that led to 223p. We've got to unify this. This is not a place for fragmentation because it's holding industry back, right? Yeah. And you can find stuff that isn't in this standard or that. That's not the point. The point is we need to work together to solve this with one. It's the only way we're going to make data easily interchangeable and break down this unnecessary cost barrier to improving the performance of the entire built environment. So.
Yep. And as I told all of our members in January, I am very frustrated by the fact that there are a bunch of different competing, efforts at this point. And I totally agree that we need to converge into one. So, and not everyone thinks that, but I'm still not convinced that it doesn't need to happen. So where do we go from here with all the different, and for people that don't know this, just listen to John talk up to this point, there's Project Haystack, but then there are 3 or 4 or 5, depending on how far you go in the world, others at this point. So, John, where do we go from here? Where should we go from here?
Yeah. So, for us, it's just continuing to evangelize both what we've accomplished, how it solves the problem, and the openness of the community, right? Come in, work. Through the collaboration with Ashray and Brick, we came out with a more defined ontology and a fixed way of expressing taxonomy and RDF expressions that was important to, people working at that level. We have tried to be inclusive, take that in and implement it and extend the standard continuously, right? And add models for equipment that hasn't been built into the library. And I've seen a couple of challenges. One challenge I see is that open source, community-based open source development hasn't been part of the fabric of our industry, right? It's been the handed down standards, right? Okay. And the other point is there's this, well, John, it's not in there. When are you going to do it? When are you going to come help?
Right.
And that's not,
like you said,
that isn't as, it's completely volunteer. A lot of people's
night jobs.
Yeah, there are no paid employees, right? In Haystack, it is 100% open source, right? The other point I'd make is that I see an unfortunate hangover from the protocol wars, right? There's a backnet and LAN and all that type of stuff, and the manufacturer threw them with one, and then they lost customer and whatever, and then they kind of did both, and then backnet emerged. I see a mental hangover there because I know that there are companies utilizing Haystack in their products who won't admit it, who won't publicize it.
Why not?
Well, we don't want to throw in with Haystack. What if one of the other ones ends up winning? We don't want to throw down a marker.
Oh, so you're saying people invested in LAN, for instance, and ended up wasting that investment because backnet won out, and they're
well, not only wasting the investment, but hurting their market opportunities. So I'll put it this way: this is a Tridium story. This is a true story, right?
Okay.
Tridium had network management tools for LAN, independently developed, right? And so we show them to people, and people go, "Oh yeah, you're in the LAN camp. Okay, you're against that backnet stuff then." And we're like, "Wait a minute, I didn't say that." Right? Okay. And we'd show people our backnet tools, and they go, "Oh, you're good. You're with the backnet. You're against that LAN." Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa. Why? There's this psychological thing. So I personally believe that is extended to this. There are numerous companies we know who are using this, who don't want to publicly support it, admit it, whatever, because maybe they're afraid, well, if the other one becomes, I don't want to show that I was biased or whatever, even though it's, it's the most developed market deployed solution in this area out there, and it continues to expand. And if anybody's tried to come in and contribute and extend the standard, they would see that, it's open. At Saddlebrook, I don't know if you remember, there was, I think it was some speakers from Canada. And their point was, we want to model flows of energy and resources through systems, and the Haystack model doesn't do it yet.
I do remember that.
Remember that? I believe it was a lady from Canada who actually presented that. Well, guess what Haystack 4 includes now? You can model relationship flows of those resources, those phenomena.
Yeah.
Need the input, right? Come work on it. Come help us solve it. So, I don't know what will happen. I know Haystack has a worldwide base of people who use it, right? And it solves so many problems that we're obviously biased. You can't help that. We're human beings, but we can see other standards and we can say, okay, throw that problem out. They haven't even got to solving that problem yet. That's not an IQ thing. It means, it took, we didn't get to it for the first couple of years either, but you're going to have to solve that and that and that.
And that's what pisses me off, is that every time someone starts a new standard, all of this stuff needs to get solved again.
Yes.
In a different silo. Talked about,
or not solved, and people may believe it, because that's another thing, is the depth of understanding of people who are looking to adopt a standard. Those are often decision makers who don't have deep understanding of this. Yeah. So can they discern that they're looking at one that actually won't give them the end result they need?
Yeah.
But may come from a company with a big label.
Absolutely.
Right. And so, we've been fortunate to have Siemens, and Intel was on the board for a number of years, and others, but I don't know why people don't see the similarity between HTML and this. Right? I fundamentally don't understand that. So.
Absolutely. All right. So Haystack 4 is going to come out in May.
Well, it's been out for almost 2 years in public review and lots of commentary extension, but, we're going to close the public review. Brian Frank will be making, a number of presentations around it to close in the public review.
Okay.
Doesn't mean it won't continue to advance, but
Right.
there's a lot of people looking for that, stamp it's released, right?
There you go. Okay.
I mean, people have been building products on it for 2+ years. So
Got it. Okay. All right. Well, what else in 2021 are you excited about besides that?
Well, I think it's important that we see the physical world come back together. There's a lot we can do virtually. You and I probably wouldn't have been able to get together in person today, aside from COVID, right? So this has helped. But I believe that it's a detriment that we're not having the shows and the conferences and the collaboration and the networking in our industry.
Yep.
You don't have that, the serendipity that comes out of meeting people and talking about things you didn't plan. Everything's planned. Well, I have a meeting with James. We're going to talk about this stuff, right? It wasn't like we happen to bump into each other at a bar at 11 o'clock at night in Nashville, right?
Right.
So we need that back. So I'm cautiously optimistic that we're seeing the corner turn, and that will come back to some degree. I think it's going to take, it's not going to be back as strong as it was for a variety of reasons, but that, and, excited that more people understand that data is critical and they need to work with it in different ways, whether you want to make digital twins or do analytics or do all kinds of other things. The foundation is data, right? So I think we're on this journey in our industry to, learn how to use data just like every other industry is, all at different paces and different levels of sophistication,
I love that. I love that answer. It does feel like, at least in the projects I'm still working on from a consulting standpoint, the value, perceived value of data is only going up. And the same with analytics at this point. So, all right, John, this has been so much fun. Thanks so much for doing this. I'm glad we finally got together.
Yeah, I'm glad we did too. And again, appreciate what you're doing out there, helping to educate the industry. It really matters. So,
doing my best. All right. Talk to you soon.
Take care. Bye.
All right, friends. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Nexus Podcast. For more episodes like this and to get the weekly Nexus newsletter, which, by the way, readers have said is the best way to stay up to date on the future of the smart buildings industry, please subscribe at nexuslabs.online. You can find the show notes for this conversation there as well. Have a great day.